This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
So makes a compelling case for his somewhat unorthodox man-overboard procedure. But the difference between this and other books concerned with practical knowledge is that Kretschmer lodges the lessons solidly in first-person narratives. His is a very pleasing voice of experience. And, in fact, ocean education is a fundamental concept behind John Kretschmer sailing. You sign on as crew to sail the boat, not to sit and sip cocktails at the taffrail while John does so. Well, sometimes you might, say during captain's hour. In Sailing a Serious Ocean, he writes this about his clients, crew. They are searching for the sea, and in the brutal honesty that flows through its currents, hoping to catch a reflection of themselves. So if this is your first meeting with John, the treat's still in store. I know you'll want to hear more after you finish Sailing a Serious Ocean. And be warned, you'll very likely want to sail with him, perhaps across an ocean, all of which are serious. And if you've read Kretschmer or sailed with him, well, then you already know why you want to listen to this book. Dallas Murphy is the author of Rounding the Horn and other ocean-related books. He met John Kretschmer on a panel at the Miami Book Fair in 2009 and subsequently had the pleasure of circumnavigating Newfoundland with him. He learned much from John on that and other voyages. Forward by Tanya Abbey. Over the years, along with Joshua Slocum and Moi Tessier, John Kretschmer has secured an iconic place in my pantheon of inspirational sailors. Even though we didn't meet until about 10 years ago, as speakers invited to the same seminar weekend, our story goes way back. I was 17 years old during my first Atlantic crossing from the Canaries to the Caribbean when we were first introduced on paper. The satellite navigation, SatNav, broke, and just as the conversational instruction of John's mail-order celestial navigation course guided my father through all the sight reduction, plotting, and running fixes, his words taught me the simpler mechanics of just the noon sight. When this trip ended and my own circumnavigation was about to begin, the outstanding qualifications of the Contessa 26 that I was planning to sail were substantiated by another John story that my father had read and liked to talk about with great flair, the one about his rounding of Cape Horn on a Contessa 32. It only followed that if a Contessa 32 could withstand such a harrowing journey in the notoriously difficult Southern Ocean, then the 26 could certainly handle the trade wind belt I faced. On my first passage from New York to Bermuda, beset as I was with rookie mistakes and navigational difficulties, it was his celestial navigation manual that I used for solace, for reassurance, for learning. The loose pages were clamped together in a red cardboard binder that still sits on a shelf above my desk almost 30 years later, and I can reread the words of his introduction that were nearly memorized while trying in vain to locate my position out in the middle of all that water. Even today, although I've sailed thousands of miles in both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, I remember my first landfall distinctly, he writes. He describes a passage from the East Coast to Bermuda. Shortly before landfall, a terrible storm drops in, and hove to and running downwind with it for over 2 days, he can't get any sun sights and keeps marking the chart with uncertain dead reckoning positions. Relying on dead reckoning myself because of storms and sight reductions and plotting that weren't worked out the way they were supposed to, I found that his words made me feel slightly less hopelessly lost. When the storm abates and the sun returns, he pulls out the sextant and resumes the business of navigating. Finding the island becomes a memorable highlight of his sailing career. Bermuda popped up on the horizon right where it was supposed to, he writes. The scene aboard was comic as the three of us jumped about screaming and shouting. Celestial navigation can do strange things to people. I found myself jumping up and down, screaming with delight only because I'd headed south until coming within range of an RDF signal that broadcast for 150 miles. But I just knew that armed with his manual, I would one day find my own islands with the sextant. And I did. Over the next couple of years, the manual became very well worn, and one landfall after another was found with John's formula. And